I think that most of us have had the experience in our lives when we're in a conversation and we're unable to grasp what the person is trying to say to us. Or maybe we are the ones trying to explain something and the person can't get what we're saying. There can be a level of frustration that enters in, and finally something clicks and someone will just blurt out, "Now I see." We use this phrase, "I see," to address a much broader concept of just physical sight, but rather to a deeper understanding of things. Certainly the essence of our faith is to accept and understand things that we don't see, but we know and we see it in the depths of our hearts and our souls. Today, this fourth Sunday of Lent, we gather. It's known as Laetare Sunday, the Latin word for that first word in our entrance antiphon today, rejoice. And it's meant to remind us of the joy that you and I are to have in our faith. This faith which is meant to illumine all things so that we can see and understand clearly. In our gospel, certainly that's the message. Jesus encounters the blind man. He heals him. And then there is this side situation, if you will, involving the Pharisees. And so there are parallel aspects of this gospel. First, the man himself is blind, and we have to remember that in Scripture, any physical infirmity means a deeper infirmity of soul and of spirit, one who is broken and marginalized. And so the physical healing that Christ gives him is a total healing. He is completely restored. But then there is the reaction of the Pharisees, who question and doubt and who oppose God's plan. They are the ones who are really blind. They are the ones who are filled with pride and self-sufficiency. They think they do not need God, and they remain in that impairment that accompanies all sin. You and I are all blind in some way, and we have to recognize that. And we have to see that the truth of God is something that needs to be revealed to us. Our first reading, God said Samuel to anoint the one who will become the king of Israel. The Lord specifically tells him not to judge by appearance or by statute. And indeed, that's God who sees those unseen sentiments of our hearts. And so the least likely among Jesse's children, the youngest one who is out with the sheep, is chosen. This choice of David that is so unlikely and unexpected. And so you and I live in this world in which the truth will be so often concealed and hidden and even opposed. So many forces in our culture are trying to blind us, to pose false values to us, to somehow appropriate, to seek material success above all things, to use persons in certain ways, to do what we think is best for us without regard for what God instructs us. The world tells us that all things are relative, so that everybody can make up their own decision in their own personal circumstance without regard to the unchanging truth of God which guides all things. And so this unbridled freedom which the world teaches is anything but freedom. For it will lead us in our disorders to a habit of sin that will only enslave us. In baptism, you and I were infused with the light of faith. And you and I have been given this unbelievable gift to see things in the light of faith. And then the words of St. Paul in our second reading, to live as children of the light, to take no part in those fruitless works of darkness. Certainly that's what Lent particularly calls us to purge ourselves of those things of darkness and to experience more and more that light and that life of Christ. We all need to be healed of our blindness. And this healing is so profoundly accomplished in the sacrament of penance and reconciliation. And again, this time of Lent calls us to the celebration of that sacrament. All of our neighboring parishes are having their Lenten penance services. Ours will be held next week, Tuesday, April 4th. Indeed, all of us are blind. But let us not be like the blind Pharisees in our gospel, but like the blind man, aware of his infirmity, grateful for that encounter with the Lord who comes to heal us. Let us open ourselves to that gift most wonderfully in the sacrament of penance and reconciliation, to experience the greatest gift of his mercy. And then, having been washed and healed like the blind man in our gospel, we may rejoice now and always, boldly proclaiming that truth of the life and love of Christ to all.